Thank you for playing a vital role in our union by serving as a member of ALPA's executive board and attending this meeting today in our conference center. Quite impressive. Perhaps you already know from your own service in the military or from being a student of military history that the individual who holds the post of the sentry or watchman is crucial to the security of the troops. And when we think of a sentry, we imagine a soldier guarding an encamped army or at the entrance of a fort. The phrase, "Halt, who goes there?" comes to mind because traditionally the sentry would ask this question to anyone who approached. Throughout military history and much of human history, sentries have detected and alerted others to danger. It was perilous duty. The watchman position and the early notice of threats that he or she provided was so important that the penalty for sleeping on duty was often death. In 1664, the Spanish built Fort Cristobal in Old San Juan. You can see from the sentry box view that the watchman was responsible for detecting potential danger far out on the horizon, even though it may seem too far away to be a threat at the time. In the U.S. Civil War, sentries known as picket guards were stationed far away from the camp so that they could watch for the enemy without being seen. Pickets, of course, are posts or stakes that are used to create a barrier. Picket guards, then, were soldiers placed on a line forward of a position to warn against the enemy advance. An aircraft or ship might also perform this sentinel function for other branches of the armed services. Now, fast forward to today. The general orders for sentries used by the U.S. Navy and U.S. Marine Corps require a sentry to challenge those who approach, but they also direct the soldier to keep always on the alert and observe everything that takes place within sight or hearing. While technology has redefined what we mean by within sight or hearing, the intent to detect and identify potential danger swiftly and while there's still time to act hasn't changed. What was true during the Civil War on a battlefield is still true today when doing business in the global marketplace. Pay attention to the sentry. So as airline pilots, who is the sentry that's responsible for detecting potential danger on the horizon? It's the union. It's you. It's the leaders in this room. You are, by definition, the sentries. So let me give you a few examples. In the airline industry, we sometimes use the term picket line differently than it was used in the Civil War. However, ALPA has heeded the signs on the horizon that traditional negotiating techniques may not always be the best model to create strong and stable labor relations and achieve contracts that advance our careers and our profession. In collective bargaining, we have recognized that we don't have to do things only one way or the same way that we've always done them. In fact, our recent work proves that we're better off if we look creatively at different negotiating options. So let's take a look at these. We've bargained new single agreements that add huge contract value before or during mergers. Delta, Northwest, United, Continental, AirTran, Southwest. We've implemented creative strategies that have rewarded us. FedEx. We've boosted Section 6 results by advancing the timeline for contract completion to address a company's and our strategic and financial interests at Delta. We looked again at building value in non-traditional contract areas like career progression, PSA, Piedmont, Pinnacle. We focused negotiations to ensure timely contract completion and complement positive labor management relations, like Alaska. That last example, relating to just finished agreement in principle Alaska Airlines, is by far the most perfect example of everything your union has tried to do in this latest round of bargaining. Although details can't be provided yet, I'm comfortable in saying that when completion of language confirms an agreement is ready for pilot ratification, the Alaska contract will have higher pay rates than those in place prior to the restructuring and bankruptcy periods, and those rates are going to conform to ALPA's new higher pay patterns. Probably the most encouraging piece of the story is that everyone worked hard to focus on these negotiations and finish the contract close to its amendable date and put the new pay rates in place retroactive to April 2013, the same day the old contract became amendable. Those are important milestones that we must continue to achieve, and congratulations to the Alaska pilots. Now, I want to be clear. I didn't say that traditional approaches aren't sometimes valuable or don't have a place in our arsenal. It means that a traditional negotiating approach is only one of many ways to achieve our contract goals. I believe firmly that the full range of options should be considered to achieve favorable patterns in the cornerstone areas of our collective bargaining agreements: pay, benefits, work rules, and job security. The same creative and open thinking ideas should apply to our contract compliance efforts. Not because we're weak or incapable of doing battle when we need to, but because we can often be more effective when all options are considered. Now, while working together as a union to bargain contracts that help all of us is important, it's equally important to ask questions about who the real competition is. Pay attention to the sentry. Some of the U.S. and Canadian airlines' strongest competitors have a track record of paying attention to potential trouble on the horizon. In this month's edition of the Airline Pilot magazine, we describe how the first ruler of Dubai recognized in the 1950s that the emirate had limited oil reserves. He knew that Dubai needed to develop an economy that would thrive long after its limited oil reserves had run out. And in the decades that's followed, he pursued a diversified economy with a tax-free business environment and pro-business policies. Today, believe it or not, oil makes up just 5% of Dubai's gross domestic product, and aviation makes up 28%, a fact that the president of the Emirates Airlines attributes to Dubai's pro-aviation policy and its leader's vision. In this case, Dubai paid attention to the sentry. We also have an example from the UAE of what can happen when there isn't a sentinel who's looking for signs of danger ahead, or no one listens. The Emirates of Dubai first became familiar to many Americans in 2005 when a state-owned company called Dubai Ports World made plans to buy a company that would have given it control over shipping operations in the U.S. ports in Baltimore, Miami, New Jersey, New Orleans, and Philadelphia. When the deal was reported in the news media in February 2006, lawmakers from both parties raised security concerns and public opposition to the sale mounted. Weeks later, Dubai Ports World announced it would sell its U.S. port operations to an American buyer. While the UAE may have failed to recognize the danger on the horizon by underestimating U.S. public opposition to the deal, its leaders learned from the experience. In the wake of being forced to pull out of the ports deal, the UAE and its ambassador to the United States have sought to positively influence the way Americans and Canadians think about the Emirate through their philanthropic projects. These projects have included buying laptops whose students had their school destroyed by a tornado in Joplin, Missouri, by donating $100 million, let me say that again, donating $100 million to the Katrina Victims Fund, supporting the Children's National Medical Center here in Washington, D.C., and just recently, one block from where I have an apartment in downtown D.C., they're creating a state-of-the-art soccer facility along with the soccer team that they own, Manchester City, at an elementary school. Okay? They're not doing this for fun. These projects have helped communities, but the real reason they're doing it is they're helping the UAE sway U.S. and Canadian public opinion about themselves. You've heard me talk about it before, and we're all aware that Middle Eastern airlines are experiencing explosive growth. And the economic muscle of these state-backed airlines show how much a government's pro-aviation policies can advance a country's airline industries and its airlines. Here, the U.S. and Canadian government needs to pay attention to the century. In the United States, strong pro-aviation government policy would do the same. It would advance the U.S. airline industry, its ability to compete and prevail on a global stage. Pro-aviation policy would also result in growth and profitability for U.S. airlines and create appropriate pay, benefits, and stable careers for U.S. airline pilots now and in the future. And the same holds true for Canada. Unfortunately, rather than promoting pro-aviation policy, the list of U.S. government policies and actions that actually harm rather than help the U.S. airline industry is getting longer. For example, the administration's fiscal year 2013 budget proposal to raise the aviation passenger security fee would only add to the airlines industry's already oppressive tax burden, as would the budget proposal for an additional $100 per flight tax. The administration's proposal also includes language to allow U.S. Customs and Border Protection to accept third-party reimbursements to begin or expand services at programs outside of the United States. As a result, the administration is proceeding with a plan to establish a pre-clearance facility at Abu Dhabi International Airport. Now we know no U.S. airline serves that airport. The facility will hand Etihad Airways, a foreign state-backed airline, a clear advantage over U.S. airlines in attracting passengers. And let's be clear, not Emirati passengers. Passengers from the Middle East, from India, from Africa, flying through there, then directly to the U.S. This misguided project must be immediately stopped. Halt. Who goes there? Think about it. The CBP U.S. taxpayer-funded resources must be directed to support U.S. airlines, U.S. workers, and the U.S. economy. And when you think about it, where we have it, it makes perfect sense. We have it with the U.S. and Canada. It facilitates our countries that work together. But to put it over there is beyond the pale. It's absolutely over the top and outrageous, and we shouldn't be standing for it, just like the American citizens who did not stand by for Dubai Port's world. Along that same theme, in 2012, the Export-Import Bank of the United States approved more than $11 billion in financing to support the export of 154 U.S. manufactured airlines to 21 countries competing with the U.S. While ALPA champions the EXIM Bank's work to promote the export of U.S. goods and services to international markets, we believe its lending practices need to be reformed. The bank cannot continue to aid U.S. airline competitors by providing financing at below market rates that are available to the U.S. companies. Now, the list of harmful government policies goes on to include the administration's proposal to eliminate funding for the Federal Flight Deck Officer Program. This is in addition to the continued gap in achieving one level of safety created by the government's failure to apply the FAA updated flight and duty time limits required for all airline pilots. ALPA is fighting hard for our members and for our industry on all of these issues. Later today, Captain Don Wyckoff, if ALPA president, and ALPA's Flight Time Duty Time Chair, and Michael Robbins, ALPA's Director of Government Affairs, will bring you more details and comments. The U.S. airline industry should not be forced to fight its own government to gain a fair playing field on which to compete in the global marketplace. Strong government leadership is necessary, and one need only look to foreign governments, such as that of the United Arab Emirates, for examples. With evidence everywhere of the powerful competition facing the U.S. airline industry, what will it take to convince the U.S. government, the government in Ottawa, to pay attention to the sentry warning of danger ahead? Again, our country's leaders must take the cue from the attitude and actions of these foreign governments and bring all of our government's power to bear in fostering a competitive airline industry. Unlike these other countries, the United States lacks a comprehensive, coherent aviation policy that allows our airlines to compete effectively on the world stage. And the U.S. government must support the continued growth of our airline industry by creating the world's safest, most efficient, and most competitive air traffic control system, airlines and airports. We need a national aviation policy now. What will happen if we don't pay attention? So let's take a look at this slide. Here's what looking ahead to 2023 might look like if government leaders fail to heed the danger on the horizon posed by state-backed foreign airlines. If you think about it, the National Mediation Board can be severely weakened. If they go away and we're under the NLRB and we have right-to-work states where you wouldn't have to be unionized, all right, where union density everywhere but the transportation sector is basically down to nil. If you look at the laws that are, I don't think protecting, but leveling the playing field on foreign ownership and control, if we're not able to keep them out of treaty negotiations where they're trying to put them in, if you've been following the Washington Post lately, there's been comments to that effect. They could effectively go around the U.S. Congress and make it so foreign airlines with unlimited funds, foreign countries with no transparency, could come in and buy our airlines. You know, somebody did a hell of a job 10, 20, 30 years ago. Those men are in this room. But they did a hell of a job because, you know, you can't find someone, a young guy coming up, who doesn't understand the meaning of the word cabotage. They understand cabotage. We need to do a better job so that they understand that foreign ownership control laws being changed, cabotage falls. If that happens, our U.S. airline unions are going to become ineffective and basically go away. They'll be non-union. You know, independent unions, which I call an oxymoron, I think we learned a long time ago that if you go it alone, you get picked off one at a time. And without the U.S., without Canada, if ALPA would basically be gone. If ICAO is allowed to be bought out and moved to Doha, if ALPA will become ineffective. We won't be able to participate on a global stage. AFL, only public sector unions in them. That's the reality of the future if we don't prevail. And the international flying is going to be based out of the Middle East. It's going to be based out of these state-owned countries, and our aviation schools will be reduced and closed. That's the future 10 years from now if we don't prevail, if we don't get together, if we don't act. So, in closing, in Norse mythology, the watchman of the gods required less sleep than a bird. He could see 100 leagues, that's 300 miles, and he could hear grass growing in the meadows and wool growing on the sheep. Sentinels and their essential role in detecting and warning others about danger are woven throughout human history. So are examples of the price to be paid for not heeding those warnings. This is our union. You are the sentinels. Building stronger labor relations at individual airlines is crucial, but so is our entire airline industry. We must have the industry pull together to call for and execute a national aviation policy that will allow our airlines to compete and profit in a global marketplace. Our union's leading that call, and our union is counting on each and every one of you to seize this opportunity that we present over the coming months to contribute to ALPA's efforts. With your individual drive and determination in achieving our shared mission, I believe we can prevail. Thank you.